Let's see if we're able to come back and be good for the final half hour of the show. Let's see. I mean, we've got everything up here. Everything's looking good. I guess we just had to recover.
Mr. Sanders, Mr. Sanders.
Yeah,
No.
we finally got that working. I don't know. We have some thunderstorms here, and stream is disconnected, attempting to reconnect a few seconds ago. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens as we come back online and all that keeps, moving forward.
Mr. Barrasso.
These poor people in the suits that have to sit here and listen to this, they don't get to dress casually for all this. Look at them right here. This is them. They're sitting there having to, be in suits. This is kind of insane. Very upsetting for them. But ultimately, becoming bread, I think the thing that I could describe your bill, and hopefully you'll come back and watch the VOD. It's free. We don't have a paywall up. We don't do that here. Hopefully, you'll come back and watch it. But the idea would be, something along the lines of being able to go for $24,000 a month. So that's not too far off from where I was guessing, right? If you're saying that you're given $2,000 a month, I think there's a pathway forward for that. I think that's pretty forward, right? The thing is that $2,000 a month that comes in and how that's going to affect everyone else's paycheck. I don't understand how that comes. Are y'all getting a tax hike for that to be able to pay for that, or is that something that's already coming out of other things that we're doing? Are we cutting funds to be able to make that happen? Or is that something that they're going to be raising taxes for? I would be interested in knowing that, if and whenever you come back. You're more than welcome to message me as well. Jump in the whisper category and go ahead and whisper over to me. You're able to hit me up there as well. If you want, you can also jump into the Discord and hit me up there as well. Send me that message. I'd be happy to answer you on that. I personally do feel like there would be a pathway forward for something like that. The biggest issue that I personally have, and I think a lot of people have, except for these crazy Republicans, is going to be that, there's people that are going to take advantage of the system. And I actually grew up in a pretty. I didn't grow up poor, but I grew up in a poverty-stricken area. And I lived there extensively through my adulthood. I actually just moved a couple of months ago out of that I saved up my money, and my wife and I, we bought a house for our family in a pretty nice area of town. So with that being said, I still know what it's like to be there as an adult who works in that area. And there's plenty of people that take advantage of the system. And, as frustrating as it is to see people with an Escalade or a Cadillac with food stamps and using them as food stamps, as much as I feel frustrated and I want to judge them, there's something that their life is lacking. There's something that they're not able to do. They may not be able to have the same luxuries that I do in life. I have a pretty nice vehicle. We have a nice home. I have a wonderful family. Things could be harder for them for sure. And also, I'm not going to stop the other person behind me that I'm not even paying attention to, who really needs those food stamps, to be able to stop the person in front of me that I'm paying attention to, who for sure does not need those food stamps because I see that they have a Escalade or a Cadillac or a Hummer or a Lamborghini. So that for sure is not something that I'm willing to do, is to, just because of those few bad people, sacrifice it for all the people that do need it. So $2,000 a month seems a little high to me, but it is what it is. During the pandemic, we got those, $2,000 checks here in the United States. And it really worked wonders for people. I think that could work, but $2,000 a month, I feel like, is a lot. I feel like during the pandemic, we got a $1,800 check and people were like, yo, I'm set for a while. So I'm pretty sure that we could go through and possibly have just a regular, maybe $1,000, on y'all's end, something like that. So roughly a $10,000 or $12,000 a year base income. And all that does is supplemental income, right? And I think, when you make $100,000 a year, or whatever is equivalent in the United States to 100,000 in Canada, you should probably drop off that, right? But your taxes still go to it. But my point still stands, is that something that we're able to go forward and do and have, where we're able to like raise taxes, or is that something that's just automatically going to be taken out of other expenditures out of the same tax bracket that you guys are in currently right now? So hopefully that answers that. We got another ad coming up here in about 5 minutes, and shortly after that ad, we're going to come back. We're going to move this all together. I'm waiting to get to about 12:01, and we're going to see what happens here as the Senate is choosing to vote, and they're going through and voting, and hopefully we can get this spending bill passed. I don't think it's going to happen here in about 4 minutes, but we'll see. For some reason, our internet is acting wonky tonight, so my apologies to everyone. Of course, once we get this downloaded, I'm going to upload this to Spotify, and we're going to get everything moving forward. So those of you that have been in here tonight, thank you so much for the follows. Blue Lives Matter 8864, Becoming Bread, thank you for coming in, the follow, and being a part of the entire process. Jesus Saves 777, thank you so much for coming in and being a part of the process as well. Dropping that follow is much appreciated. See, February 7th, 2024 is when you first got yours. Becoming Bread, you have been a member since 2016. You are a person who is active and is in here, for sure. So that's always nice. And Blue Lives Matter 8864, following since an hour ago. You've been created an hour ago, so you actually are just someone who is brand new. Blue Lives Matter 8864. So that's probably why you can't talk. We do have a chat limit on when you would be able to talk based on when you follow, or when your account was created, really. I don't think we're going to make it, guys. It's already 11:58, so I don't think we're going to make it for the time frame that we're looking at here. Let's see.
Mr. Fetterman, Mr. Fetterman.
Hey,
no.
John Fetterman. You gotta love the John Fetterman. That guy with his sweatshirt. Fantastic. Gotta love him. Like him or love him, there's a guy in a sweatshirt in the Senate. He got yelled at for wearing that sweatshirt. You got to keep that in mind as well. Quite forward of him to wear that sweatshirt. But I'll be honest with you, when you got late nights like this, like don't you want to be comfortable in wearing a sweatshirt and in sweatpants? I say more power to him. I feel like that'd be like a baller move too, right? You showing up in like a sweater and sweatshirt, and you're like, I just rolled out of bed. I'm not feeling good, and here I am to do my due. I'm gonna be voting on some bills today to pass some funding for the United States government. So let's see what happens here. I'm always interested in watching these because you get so many people like this lady right here just walking around talking. The government is in y'all's hands. I'm not sure what's happening. It'd be great if we would go through and pass a bill and get some funding going so the government doesn't shut down tonight. That'd be fantastic. I would hope that they would do that.
Mr. Hawley, aye.
There's Chuck Schumer. You know, I was in a stream earlier tonight, and someone was talking about Chuck Schumer being this POS who's been in the Senate forever. And as much as I can agree that he's been in the Senate forever,
Mr. Cruz.
I don't know if I would call him a POS. Cruz, Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, Mr. Cancun himself. Running away from the great state of Texas whenever we needed him most during a Winter Storm Uri. You know, you in Canada would probably laugh at that, but It is what it is. All right, so we got an ad coming up here in about 30 seconds, guys. We're going to start that ad. We're going to run our traditional Stop Trump, Anti-Trump ad by the Midas Touch Mighty Network. And we will be back here in just a couple of moments.
And people look around and they say, am I better off now than I was 4 years ago? The answer to that is
President Trump's proposed budget plan could threaten America's ability to fight health threats.
This is their new hoax. They have no clue.
We have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
The U.S. leading the world in deaths.
So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
At some point, that's going to sort of just disappear, I hope.
half of the U.S. population is without a job.
We have not seen numbers like that since the Great Depression.
Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?
Store shelves nationwide are dwindling or totally empty.
The disinfectant, is there a way we can do something like that by injection?
Testing's frankly overrated.
1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is.
Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?
They cannot run on are you better off than you were 4 years ago.
To refer the message to accompany HR.
All right, so we are back, guys.
To
The vote did fail.
With instructions.
Clerk will report.
The Senator from Kentucky, Mr. Paul, moves to refer the message with respect to H.R. 2882 to the Committee on Appropriations of the Senate with instructions to report the same back to the Senate in 1 day, not counting any day on which the Senate is not in session, with changes that reduce the total amount made available under the message by 5%, which shall not include the reduction of any amount made available to the Department of Defense or the reduction of any amount made available for securing the international border of the United States.
There'll be 2 minutes of debate, equally divided. Who yields time?
Mr. President, in that case, I will also yield back my time.
All time yielded back. The question is on the motion. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett.
All right,
Mrs.
so
Blackburn.
we're back here. The vote just failed. It was 44 to
Bozeman.
54, I believe, is what that was.
Braun.
I might be off a
Brett.
number or two on theirs, but ultimately it ended up failing. Not enough Democrats jumped in on the bill.
Mr. Brown, Mr. Budd, Ms. Butler, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito,
So what they've decided to do is to do another roll call, sit in the seats,
Mr.
do
Carter.
the 10-minute roll call
Mr.
and
Carver.
voting. They'd be able to go through it. We did have a try for the Republicans say that the 4 amendments on the bill, they wanted to go through and just do those 4 amendments separately to be able to vote those out, to be able to get things in versus out.
Casey.
That is something that they were trying to do.
Mr. Cassidy,
But, you know, it is what it is.
Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer.
You know, the thing is about these bills,
Mr.
like
Crapo.
whenever they do call your name, right? Like
Cruz.
what I feel like is an appropriate response
James.
would be yes or no,
Ms.
yay or
Duckworth.
nay, you know, in the hell no,
Durbin.
fuck no,
Ms.
you know,
Ernst.
like it's upsetting because
Mr.
these are
Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher,
mosely college graduate,
Mrs.
high
Gillibrand,
educated
Mr.
people.
Graham,
And they
Grassley,
could definitely use some,
Mr.
you know,
Haggerty.
manners. I'm not saying that I have a clean mouth. I'm just saying that
Hassan.
I'm also nowhere near the education and power
Hawley,
level
Mr.
that these people
Heinrich,
are. They could just
Mr.
say, you know,
Hickenlooper,
yay or nay to
Ms.
something like that.
Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hyde Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford,
I don't even know who's calling.
Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Manchin,
Oh, I see her. She's in the red over there.
Markey.
Okay.
Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez.
This is a busy job. Like, who's sitting around here at 12:15 at night? Like, who's this gal right here?
Mr. Moran,
Like,
Mr. Mullen,
who's running around with this paperwork, adding all this? Do they have to keep printing these out like every time they vote? That's truly insane. This is where some of our money's going.
Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr.
Harry
Ricketts,
Reid, Texas.
Mr. Risch, Mr. Romney, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Ms. Sinema, Ms. Smith, Ms. Stabenow.
Let's see. We're getting to the end here.
Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville,
Look at Chuck Schumer over here. He looks terrified. Looks absolutely terrified.
Mr. Vance, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young,
I feel like we could have some better technology that would calculate these a little bit better. Like, don't they have like clickers? Like we got clickers in college to take tests.
Affirmative. Barrasso, Blackburn, Britt, Budd, Cassidy, Cornyn, Cotton, Kramer, Crapo, Daines, Ernst, Fisher, Graham, Grassley, Haggerty, Hawley, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Kennedy, Langford, Lee, Lummis, Marshall, Mullen, Paul, Rounds, Schmidt, Scott of South Carolina, Sullivan, Thune, Tuberville, and Wicker. Mr. Risch, aye. Senators voting in the negative. Baldwin, Bennett, Blumenthal, Booker, Bozeman, Brown, Butler, Capito, Cardin, Casey, Collins, Coons, Cortez Masto, Duckworth, Durbin,
Cortez Masto.
Fetterman, Gillibrand, Hassan, Heinrich, Hickenlooper, Hirono, Kane, Kelly, King, Klobuchar, Lujan, Manchin, Markey, McConnell, Menendez, Merkley, Moran, Murkowski, Murray, Ossoff, Padilla, Peters, Reed.
There's Mitch McConnell right here.
Romney, Rosen, Sanders, Schatz, Schumer, Shaheen, Sinema, Smith, Stabenow, Tester, Tillis, Van Hollen, Vance, Warner, Warnock, Warren, Welch, Whitehouse, Wyden, and Young. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Cruz, aye. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Wicker, No.
I don't know how they're still awake. Chuck Schumer is halfway dead right now. Mitch McConnell's also halfway dead. I think he's just on his phone.
Mr. Carper, no.
She's looking lost and confused right here. I don't know what's going on.
Cantwell, no.
What machine is this? Does she have like a thermal reader? Like, what is happening here? What is this? Look at this. There's like an iPad. It's like a computer all in one. I don't know.
No.
She like ordering food for people? She security? Is she like bomb checking? There's Lindsey Graham. If we've not seen Lindsey Graham, here's Lindsey Graham right here. Here's someone in a hoodie. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, they got all over John Fetterman for wearing a hoodie. I don't know why that lady gets to wear a hoodie. I think she was wearing a full tracksuit.
Mr. Murphy, no.
Here we go. We should be getting the rolls in here, and that's probably going to be it for the night. There's Ted Cruz. Anyone who's interested in looking at Ted Cruz, here's old Teddy Boy right here, running from the great state of Texas during Winter Storm Uri right here. Crazy man. All right, let's get the counts, everybody. Let's see. I don't think it's going to pass either. Like, this is too crazy. But we are, I mean, it is up against a wall, right? Like, the government is shutting down right now. So I don't know. Maybe it will happen. I don't know. I guess we'll just be here and wait and see, grin and bear it, you know. See what's happening. Yo, you know what's interesting is we always get these bills where it's the House passing them in the morning time, and the Senate has to pick them up and do that here in the evening. And it's kind of like, you know, the kids are playing around in the morning, but now we have the adults ready to do everything that they're doing. And this is the adults that are staying up late to be able to pass the bill and, you know, wrap the presents, if you will. So
On this vote, the yeas are 34, the nays are 63. The motion is not agreed to.
President,
the majority leader.
For the information of all senators, we're going to try to skip the recap. That'll save a lot of time, but that means everyone has to be in his or her seat. Don't go to the front and answer. Just be in your seat and answer yes or no.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I move to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with their amendment 1804.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Texas, Mr. Cruz, moves to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with
There it goes.
further amendment numbered 1804.
There are 2 minutes of debate on this motion, equally divided. The senator from Texas.
Mr. President, right now Israel is facing the worst war in the Middle East in 50 years. On October 7th, more than 1,200 Israelis were murdered by Hamas terrorists. More than 30 Americans were murdered by Hamas terrorists. Hamas was funded by Iran. Hezbollah is funded by Iran. In the last 3 years, the Biden administration has flowed more than $100 billion to Iran, has sent the money that paid for the Hamas terrorists that committed those active atrocities. This amendment is very simple. It prohibits the Biden administration from sending billions of dollars to Iran. The Ayatollah pledges death to America and death to Israel. The question is, does the United States of America want to be responsible for funding the genocidal, theocratic lunatic who leads Iran, who is funding Hamas, who is waging war against Israel? The Democrats are going to move to table, and so a vote to yes for yes is a vote to fund Iran. A vote for no is to say not one more penny should go to the lunatics in Iran.
Senator's time has expired.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
President, I rise in opposition to this motion. It does not do what the senator from Texas says. Our sanctions are critical national security tools. The U.S. Iranian sanctions are the strongest economic sanctions.
Let's listen to what they have.
World.
I will be right back.
The Cruz Amendment would eliminate the waiver that's available for national security interests. This provision would effectively limit the use of the waiver in any instances of which is met the significant threshold. For example, use for accommodating humanitarian or basic human needs, including food and medicine, and to pay for vetted third-party non-Iranian vendors. It would also impair our ability to maintain the international coalition in support of our sanctions against Iran. And for all those reasons, I move to table the motion to concur with the Cruz Amendment 1804 and ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. There is. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Braun. Mrs. Britt. Mr. Brown. Mr. Budd. Ms. Butler. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mr. Fetterman. Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. King. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Langford. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lujan. Ms. Lummis. Mr. Manchin, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Mr. Moran, Mr. Mullen,
So it sounds like they're voting to table
Murkowski,
that vote that they just made.
Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff,
I'm interested to see what happens here, you know? Let's see what happens, how this works.
Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Mr. Romney, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Rubio,
Marco Rubio.
Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Ms. Sinema, Ms. Smith, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Vance, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young.
Dude, they have like people that are bringing them water. These ladies are not only like, I guess they're assistants, but they're bringing water. Like they just got this lady water right here. Like that's neat, I guess. I mean, I feel like you could go get your own water if you're a senator. Yeah, what's happening? Someone's happening over here. Look at this. Something's happening. Tracksuit mama over here. Nothing but a tracksuit mama. You know what happens if like none of this happens tonight? If no one's able to get anything, if we don't move anything, if we don't go anywhere, I mean,
You're fucked. You are absolutely fucked.
that's what's going to happen. We're all fucked if this doesn't get passed. Oh, boy. I'm interested in the computers that this, like, what does this lady have on? What is this thing? You can see it's reading it. There's a camera. You can see, like, there's a picture here. I'm not sure what happens. I've been watching, waiting to see what they're doing. Oh, it's typing. Oh, wow. That's neat. This is a stenographer. She's a stenographer. That is a skill. A skill that I definitely don't have, but a skill. Imagine being a stenographer here today. We have all this recording, but we don't have a stenographer. It's truly remarkable. Excuse me. We're starting a new roll. The lady's getting the long paper out. We're starting a new roll. I'll be honest with you.
On this vote, the yeas are 51, the nays are 47. The motion to table is agreed to.
Mr. President.
The senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, I move to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with further amendment 1781.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Alabama, Mr. Tuberville, moves to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with further amendment numbered 1781.
There'll be 2 minutes of debate on this motion, equally divided. The senator from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. President. I still can't believe we're having serious conversations about men competing in women's sports. We've lost our mind. So I know many of you have daughters.
We have order, please. We have order. Senator from Alabama.
Give my time.
I know some of you have daughters, nieces, and granddaughters that play sports. My amendment will protect the integrity of women's and girls in sports. It will protect
So what we're doing here is we're just like throwing things in, right? We've got the ability to pass a piece of legislation here tonight to fund. But what we're doing is we're throwing anything that we can in. Let's pack this in. Let's pack that in. Anything that we can. We're talking about women's sports.
Ensure that only biological women can compete against each other. An educational institution should not be able to use federal funds to implement a radical agenda.
I do actually support that. Like, the thing is, I don't support this bill, but I support like that ideology, right? Like the idea is that, you know, if you're a trans female, that means that you're coming from a male. You have you know, testosterone, and your body's just built differently. You should not be able to compete against other women in high school sports or college sports or professional sports because you're going to have a leg up on them. But with that being said, I think that, you know, maybe we should have like a third sport. So we do have a special Olympics, you know, for people that are disabled or have disabilities. And I think that, you know, we could have a fourth sport category then for people that are in transgender that want to be able to compete with each other.
Loud and clear. This amendment is as bigoted and dangerous as it is unnecessary. Of all the challenges facing our nation, I am stunned this is how any senator would ask this institution to spend its time. Trans kids deserve to be kids. They deserve to play sports, go to school, be with their friends. They should not have to worry about hateful rhetoric and laws that attack their very existence. And they definitely shouldn't live in fear of a Congress that's going to stipulate that their school won't get any federal funding if their coach just simply lets them play sports with their friends. That's nothing to say that passing any amendment on this bill will guarantee a government shutdown. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the motion to table. And Mr. President, I move to table the motion to concur with Tuberville Amendment number 1781. I ask for the ayes and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There is. The clerk will call the roll.
It's going to be another one of these circle jerks, right?
Mr. Barrasso.
What's behind these
Mr.
doors?
Bennett.
We gotta do like a
Mrs.
virtual
Blackburn.
tour.
Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Braun, Mrs. Britt. Mr. Brown. Mr. Budd.
We're just gonna go through and do this. Truly insane. What a waste of time. We had all the time in the world to pass something. At this point, the government has shut down.
Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth.
It's Kleenexes.
Mr.
That guy
Durbin.
needed Kleenexes, and that
Ms.
guy had to
Ernst.
get up and get Kleenexes.
Mr. Fetterman. Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty.
No.
Ms. Hassan. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. King. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Lankford. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Manchin, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Mr. Moran, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy.
Who sits in these seats between like these bottom senators down here that seem to have like spare seating? Who sits in these seats?
Mr. Paul.
You know, I see someone over here.
Mr. Peters.
But they all don't
Mr.
have
Reed.
desks. Some of them are open
Mr.
and vacant.
Ricketts. Mr. Risch. Mr. Romney. Ms. Rosen. Mr. Rounds.
Oh, thank you,
Mr.
Becoming
Rubio.
Bread. Yeah.
Mr.
We're having
Sanders.
some storms here right now, and you know we're getting random
Schmidt.
weather and wind coming
Mr.
in.
Schumer.
Must have knocked out internet.
Mr. Scott of Florida. Mr. Scott of South Carolina. Mrs. Shaheen.
We have not passed
Sinema.
anything. We keep trying to like lob
Smith.
stuff in. Like I was telling the camera earlier, the audience, I was
Sullivan.
hoping you'd return, but
Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune.
I'll tell you after this
Tillis.
once we see.
Mr. Tuberville.
That's a stenographer, by the
Van
way, right
Hollen.
here. This lady we were wondering about
Mr.
earlier,
Vance.
she's a stenographer running
Mr.
around.
Warner. Mr. Warnock. Ms. Warren. Mr. Welch. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Young.
All right, so she's going through and calculating, tabloiding everything as she tabulates. So what I wanted to talk to you about was, oh yeah, no problem. You know, I don't even know why the internet went out, to be honest with you, but is what it is. So Becoming Bread, I wanted to answer your question. Earlier we were talking about, you know, did I think that would pass? And ultimately I think there is a pathway forward for that. I think that $2,000 a month is pretty crazy. 7.5 hour, but my gross income was $3,000. So you're saying that your $3,000 was your gross income, $2,000 is what they're looking to pay a month. I do feel like that's a little bit high, but that's kind of like spot on with what I had guesstimated, right? Roughly $20,000 to $24,000 a year. If you're at $2,000, it's $24,000 given the 12 months. So $2,000 a month. During the pandemic here in the United States, we ended up getting like $1,800 checks about 2 or 3 times. And that was scattered over the course of basically a year and some change. So, and that made a big difference for people. So I feel like you can do a lot less than the $2,000 a month. I don't think they need to be living very well, right? These are, yeah, I think it's going to help. Anything is going to help these people.
The nays are 47. The motion to table is agreed to.
Mr. President.
Oh, here we
The
go.
senator from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to concur in the House amendment to Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with further amendment number 1795.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Missouri, Mr. Schmidt, moves to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with further amendment numbered 1795.
Thank you, Mr. President.
2 minutes on this motion, equally divided. The senator from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jefferson Smith is a newly minted senator, and Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington opined, liberty is too precious a thing to be buried in books. Men should hold it in front of them every single day of their lives and say, I am free to think and to speak. My ancestors couldn't, I can, and my children will. My amendment tackles a fundamental issue that should bring us together as a Senate, protecting Americans' First Amendment rights in the virtual town square. The First Amendment is the beating heart of our Constitution. It protects fundamental human expression, and the government shouldn't be deciding what we can read or what we can hear.
Order in the Senate will.
Or what we can
Senator
say.
from Missouri.
Earlier this week, Murphy v. Missouri was heard in the United States Supreme Court. I filed that case when I was Attorney General in Missouri. At issue in that case is what is at the heart of the issue here in this amendment, which is pretty simple. Should the federal government and its leviathan of agencies be allowed to coerce and
Leviathan
close
of
companies
agencies
to censor speech online? The answer for every American should be a resounding no. Unfortunately, that's what top officials in the Biden administration were doing and why this amendment's so important. What's more, censorship isn't limited to just conservative-leaning speech.
Hail Hydra.
Time has expired.
All ideologies. This should bring us together.
It's all about Project Leviathan.
I urge this body to support it.
The senator from Illinois.
Mr. President,
Okay, let's
at
see
a
the
moment
rebuttal.
in our history when we're giving speeches about our concern of the impact of disinformation and misinformation.
Where's this guy's microphone?
This is exactly the wrong amendment. We know the Russians, the Chinese, and God knows who else are using information and twisting information and delivering it to our neighbors as a truth. And how are they supposed to know any better? This amendment will basically remove the authority of the United States government to speak up about misinformation and disinformation. If you want
I think he is wearing it. I think it's right here. I think I get like a glimpse of a cord coming down.
Make sure we're doing everything
I don't
in our
know.
power to stop Vladimir Putin and others from infiltrating America. Vote no on this amendment.
Questions on the motion?
Dude, normally we have a
Needs to be
gavel.
requested.
This
There's
is
a
interesting.
Second. There appears to be. There is. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Barrasso.
So is that just like a thing?
Mr.
Is
Bennett.
that just like this and he's
Blackburn.
banging it, or is there an actual gavel? So they're going to go through and call the roll here.
Mr. Blumenthal.
But to answer your question, becoming bread,
Booker.
so 2,000 a month was net
Mr.
and 3,000 was gross when you had a job.
Mr.
Are you
Braun.
saying
Mrs.
that they're doing
Frick.
2,000 though a month is what they're looking
Mr.
at? Let me go
Brown.
back up here. To give you an idea of our tax rate in Canada,
Butler.
so roughly a third is what you were talking about. That was at $7.50 per hour, but my gross income was $3,000.
Carper.
So roughly a third
Mr.
of your
Casey.
income. I mean, it's a fairly large amount of
Cassidy.
income. Is
Collins.
the current idea for a
Coons.
basic income increasing your
Mr.
tax
Cornyn.
wage? You know,
Ms. Cortez Masto.
I know it looks like a Stoughton House chess piece,
Kramer.
doesn't it? Not looks like Stoughton House. That could be a pin. I don't think it was a pin though.
Mr. Daines.
I didn't see a mic, but this guy was talking like Jesus up in there.
Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mr.
Reason I
Pruitt.
know so much about chess pieces is my father-in-law
Fisher.
is a collector, and yeah,
Gillibrand.
I've learned a lot about Stoughton House or House of Stoughton, and
Graham.
several other chess
Grassley.
pieces as well.
Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Heinrich.
So yeah, if
Hickenlooper.
you know, if you're not going to be end up paying any extra for that, any extra taxes, I mean, I guess that's a win, right? Now the question is, do you feel like that's too much money that they're going to be giving, whether they're giving $1,000 or $2,000 a month? You know, is that too much money? I feel like in probably Canada, $2,400 a month, or I'm sorry, $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year is probably not that much money, right?
Lujan. Ms. Lummis. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Markey. Mr. Marshall. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley.
Everyone gets 2,000 regardless of income. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like everyone gets 2,000 a month.
Mr. Mullen.
The thing is like that doesn't work, right? There's got to be a cap. Who's not? And who's taking up the tab, right? Because there's got to be millionaires or billionaires that are paying more in. And I'd be interested in knowing what their tax rate is versus the people who are making a lot less or significantly less or who are at the poverty line. That $2,000 is going to go a long way. But people that are just north of the poverty line, it is going to go a long way. But also, you know, it's going to help them out to be able to further themselves. But for the people in the middle class, it's not going to do much, right? It's an extra $2,000 a month. It is great. You can buy some more knickknacks. You can go out to eat a little bit more, and you can have, you know, some good times. Maybe you can finally, you know, maybe fix some parts of your house, maybe your heater or things like that. But ultimately, I think that the $2,000 a month is the buck's going to stop somewhere, and people are going to have to pay for it. because everyone can't get it. Like, you shouldn't be giving $2,000 a month for millionaires and billionaires and people who are high-end middle class, making well over, in America, high-end middle class would be people making over, you know, $180,000 a year. If you make over $180,000 a year, like, you don't need that basic income. You're set, right? So it's got to have a stopping point.
Mr. Vance.
My rent is $725 monthly. That's not bad rent. Do y'all also have, just a side note, after you're answering what I was asking, do you guys also have like a universal like rent like agreement, like where they can't like gouge you on the rent or things like that? It's based off square footage and amenities or anything like that?
Mr. Welch. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Young.
All right, so they've gone through, they've calculated, they're tabulating right now. So what's interesting is, so this is a stenographer. There's another lady walking around who's stenographer as well. You've got this gentleman right here, and he's got clickers, and what he's doing is clicking, and I guess like doing a clicker for the left and for the right for the yays and the nays, and then what they're going to do is be able to go over and give that reading to, you know, someone to be able to go through and create that list, and then they tabulate, because someone was manually counting. You've got the clickers, I guess. Maybe there was even a computer that was calculating as well. So, you know, they're going through and just trying to gather all the numbers. So that's interesting. This is an interesting thing to watch. If it wasn't a government shutdown, we normally wouldn't be watching this kind of thing, but as we pick up here on the channel, we're definitely going to be watching more and more of these things. It's very interesting to watch and see. Man, let me tell you though, just as a observation here, there is a gal here who is just really drop dead gorgeous. She is a gorgeous gal.
The yeas are 47, the nays are 51. The motion is not agreed to. The senator from Wisconsin.
I move to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with further amendment number 1706.
These are the same bills that have been happening, the same breakdowns.
Mr. Johnson moves to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with further amendment number 1706.
The Senate will be in order. There are 2 minutes equally divided. The senator from Wisconsin.
Mr. President, in the last 4 months, we've seen a string of horrific crimes in which the suspects are illegal immigrants. In December, a 16-year-old cheerleader was stabbed to death in Edna, Texas.
Order in the Senate.
In my state, a 20-year-old nurse was run down by a drunk driver. In January, again in my state, a Special Olympian was struck by a drunk driver. In Campbell County, Virginia, a 14-year-old girl was sexually assaulted. In January, a 2-year-old was caught in the crossfire of gangs and murdered. In Kenner, Louisiana, a 14-year-old girl was raped by another individual and was stabbed by an illegal suspect.
Becoming bread, I'll get to you in a second.
Riley was beaten to death while jogging in Athens, Georgia. And just last week, a 15-year-old mentally impaired girl was raped in Massachusetts. Mr. President, this must stop. My amendment is simple. It prohibits labor, HHS, and education funding from going to sanctuary cities that do not comply with the request from DHS to provide advance notice of date and time illegal aliens are scheduled to be released from local custody. We can stop these crimes. We must secure our border. Please vote yes.
President. Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, this is a perfect example of an amendment.
Never seen this guy before.
That does not deserve to be debated without real work and real bipartisan commitment. This is a legitimate issue. Making sure that we have notice when you have an individual in state or local custody. But this version of the amendment doesn't work. It likely violates the 10th Amendment. It likely violates the 4th Amendment. It fundamentally misunderstands the statute it implicates, 8 U.S.C. 1373. There is a better way to do this in a bipartisan manner. In fact, a number of us just recently introduced legislation that would allow ICE to obtain a legal warrant when you have an individual in state or local custody to make sure that they end up being put into removal proceedings. So let's continue to work on this very important issue. This is just the wrong way to do it, likely deeply unconstitutional. And for that reason, I would move to table the motion to concur with the Johnson Amendment number 1706, and I would ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. There is. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
This guy is so upset
Grasso.
about all this. We're going to bring this down so that way I can tell you a little bit and answer your question. So the gentleman was talking about, all these, the gentleman from Wisconsin, the guy who was speaking first, he's a senator from Wisconsin. He was talking about how his state and across multiple states, there are multiple crimes that are committed by illegal aliens, if you will, in their language, illegal migrants that come through the borders every day and make it into the United States and then get cut loose because they're waiting for a trial by a judge or a viewing by a judge to be able to see, the likelihood of what their threat for asylum is, to be able to hear their asylum claims, to be able to then issue a grant. So with that being said, he was talking about the amount of violent crimes that are occurring because of that. And he mentioned Lincoln Riley. This is a name that we all know. It's very sad that Lincoln Riley is being used this way when Lincoln Riley is a sad day that a woman like that ended up going through and was jogging, and she was brutally beaten and sexually assaulted and, was killed. While she was just jogging in Georgia. She was a nursing student, and it's just horribly sad. It's horrible to see any life lost. It's important to remember, though, that we're bringing up the illegal immigrants that are coming through the border doing this, and it's important to remember that illegal immigrants are not. Every 68 seconds, according to the United States government, a person in the United States is sexually assaulted every 68 seconds, and this has been that way forever. Okay, on an average of 463,634 victims aged 12 years of age or older every year in the United States. 54% of all those victims are going to be women between the age of 18 to 34. And it's important to note that 1 out of every 6 women in the United States is ever sexually assaulted. It's important to remember that most of these crimes, the overwhelming majority of these crimes, 99.9% of these crimes are not committed by illegal immigrants. They're committed by Americans. They're committed by you and me. And it's important to remember that, because this is just smoke and mirrors by the Republicans. Most migrants that come to the border are peaceful. Will they stay here? Yes. The other argument is that they don't pay taxes. They don't pay their fair share. I'll be honest with you. They don't get anything from the system, and they pay taxes into it. They have to shop and buy food, water, supplies throughout their stay here in the United States. All of that is taxed. It's not given to them other than, a starter package, if you will. All that is taxed. Also, a lot of migrants will end up buying homes that they'll never be able to officially, get the money back from. With that being said, all the taxes that they're paying go into the taxes to the states and to the federal government eventually. So ultimately, illegal immigrants do pay taxes, and it's a big thing that Republicans love to do. And as a Republican, I'm telling you, this is what I've been told my whole life. And once you look into it, it just changes your mind, because honestly, we do need to do something in this country about the border crisis and the migrant situation. We do need to make it easier for people to come here. We need to make it easier for the president to be able to close the border and hold down when there's massive waves of migrants coming in. But with that being said, we don't need to kill people at the border just who are claiming asylum. This is not how this is supposed to be. World War II made sure that this was not going to happen when we talked about the Geneva Convention and all those conventions following World War II that we signed, all those documents saying that people had unalienable rights, and this is one of the unalienable rights. So with that being said, boom. Illegals aren't good. They can go, they could be good people, but you need to keep in mind the supply and demand of everything when you let so many people in. New York City is also having issues with having so many. The big thing with New York City is, though, breaking bread, is that what we've had is governors around the state shipping people there constantly, right? And I'll be honest with you. there is plenty of people in the United States who are willing to go buy food and then give it up, right? And we have a surplus of food here. We are Americans. We are fat. Myself am overweight. We have a lot of food. We have the ability to go forward and to use less food. We have the ability to be able to provide food.
The motion to table is agreed to.
Yeah, they table the motion. So let's see what happens here.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
I move to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2.
I want to make Sprite the national beverage.
1713.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford moves to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with further amendment numbered 1713.
We have 2 minutes of debate, equally divided. The senator from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to ask my colleagues to support my amendment that would strike earmarked funding for a hospital that
This guy looks half a preacher.
surgical abortions, including well into the 5th month of pregnancy. In fact, this hospital, on their website, they brag that they routinely provide abortions up to 22 weeks. 5.5 months into a pregnancy is a late-term abortion. This is beyond even the Roe standard of viability. At 22 weeks, that's 5.5 months, a baby at that point can certainly feel pain. A baby can smile. They have formed tear ducts. They can recognize
This is important. I want to answer you, but this is an important moment.
voices. They even have their taste buds already formed at that point. Portugal restricts abortions after 10 weeks. Austria, Denmark, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Norway, Switzerland, and the Ukraine all restrict abortion after 12 weeks. Belgium, Luxembourg, Spain restrict after 14. This is a hospital bragging they do abortions at 22 weeks. We may disagree on when life begins, but we should not provide federal dollars for a facility that advertises it performs late-term abortions routinely. We should strike this earmark.
It's important to note that, like, as true as that is, right?
Mr. President, this amendment would strike funding to help Women and Infants Hospital in Providence, Rhode Island, build a new midwifery unit in order to help ensure babies can safely enter the world and that their moms can have a safe and positive childbirth experience. Some GOP members are insinuating that this is about abortion, and no funds will be used for abortions. In fact, these funds will truly have a clear and direct benefit for Rhode Island babies and moms, and I would urge the defeat of the amendment. I yield my time to Senator White House.
Mr. President, the actual text of the application for this earmark says that it's to develop a nationally accredited in-hospital birth center, a midwifery unit, to provide healthy birthing individuals the choice to give birth in protected, dedicated space for normal physiologic birth, reduce the risks and costs of instrumental births and surgical delivery, and reduce hospital length of stay, thereby reducing healthcare costs. Also, training midwives. It's one thing to be anti-abortion.
The senator's
it's
time
another
has
to be
expired.
anti-IVF or anti-mifepristone.
The senator's time has expired.
I urge that we oppose the senator's amendment.
Okay, so we're going to take a vote on that.
All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to.
There you go. That was actually a lot quicker.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2882 with further amendment 1718.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford,
We've-
moves to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2822 with further amendment numbered 1718.
We have 2 minutes of debate, equally divided. The senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, yesterday, 5,770 people illegally crossed our southern border. Some of them were identified as special interest aliens. Now, let me give you the definition for special interest aliens from the Department of Homeland Security.
This is true, right? So I'll cut him down here because I have to agree with what he's currently saying right now. We have a lot of people that come across the border that are special interest aliens. I got what he's saying, right? I don't like to use the term aliens, but I got you. It is in the Bible, so anyone who dislikes the term aliens, I'll be honest with you, it's in the Bible. If it's there. With that being said, yet again, not everyone is evil, right? So there's that. We had a bill here just a couple of weeks ago that we could have passed. The Senate could have, the House could have passed it, and the Senate had already passed it. They actually found it in the Senate. It was crafted by Republicans, and Trump killed it. Trump killed it, saying that, I don't want to hand Biden a win. It's really upsetting that something like that happened when we've got everything that we can to be able to make that work. When progressive Democrats are running for the hills from a bill, it might be a pretty decent bill is all I'm saying. With that being said, he was talking about earlier, it's important to remember that with abortion, you're dealing with people that most people are not trying to kill 6-month-old, 5-month-old, 9-month in utero babies, like full-term babies. What they're doing is taking the ability to take babies that are coming to term if they have just genetic conditions that they're not going to survive at birth. Why are we going to put a baby through that and also put the mothers through that, who the mother could end up with significant internal bleeding, significant effects to their birthing systems, and allow them not to be able to have babies? In fact, most of these women that terminate are wanting to, in fact, have children. This is not someone who is a drug addict who is trying to get rid of a baby. Not saying that doesn't happen. I'm just saying that when we talk about these later term abortions, and also we talk about methylpristone as being removed when it's found to be a safe method for people to be able to basically wash out the system a couple days after a pregnancy could have occurred. But with that being said, we're not talking about that tonight. It's way too late to be able to go into that. I'm here till 1:01 to see what the time frame comes in. But to be able to answer your question, I do have to agree. In New York, they're facing a lot of stuff in New York, becoming bread. It's a lot of stuff that they're facing, but you got to remember that governors took all these people and shoved them into New York City, shocking the system that has never been shocked like this before. Texas, the border states, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, we've all gone through this, right? Like, we've all been there. We are aware of what it takes. We've had people come across the border for years, for decades. So we are aware of what happens. We do have big migrants that come through, big caravans, and those are devastating to our systems, and it is something we need to address. And that's why I'm very upset that we had a Senate bill that would have done something about that, and Trump killed it along with the Republicans in the House, and that's really upsetting. But kind of get back to a little bit of what you were saying here underneath that. You were talking about, the schools can be overrun. They can, we don't have the best schooling system, but I'll be honest with you, tax dollars are going to go to it, and we're going to figure it out, especially if we applied funding, which brings us to a whole different topic that we don't have time for tonight, the underfunding of schools. So you don't get to say that schools are going to be, not you becoming bread, but Republicans like to say that schools are going to be underfunded or underserved because of the weight on this by the illegal aliens if we let them in, and then also not want to increase the cost of the schools when they're already underfunded just with the American citizens that are there. It just doesn't make any sense. I think less people should stop removing foreskin. It's genital mutilation. I think that that's a good point. I personally am unaware of, obviously there's biblical reasons why this started, but I'm unaware of how we continued it for so long. When the Bible was written by basically mankind who was probably high or smoking all kinds of grasses and opium in that part of the world. I think in Norway, it might be Sweden, but they have very low rates of individuals with Downs because they often get abortions, and that's a thing to remember, right? Now, I don't think that Down syndrome is a reason to have that abortion. And I understand if we make laws that allow for open abortions, then things like this would happen, right? I'll be honest with you. I think that we have the ability to negotiate and to be able to make laws that would be able to protect people with Down syndrome from such a genocide like that, right? I personally think that people with Down syndrome are great. It's just a genetic defect, right? They have an extra chromosome, and I think that it is a lovely individual that they have, right? They instead of the two pairs, they have the one pair with one hanging off the side, and I think what I love about people with Down syndrome is ultimately they're so happy. We should learn a lot from them, right? We are too concerned about the stresses and the things on in life, but ultimately people with Down syndrome are relatively happy. They're happy people. They love life. They love each other, and they love the world. And I think we could all learn something from that. So I'm not with Sweden and whatnot, and also that what you're saying could be true. It also may not be true. That might not actually be what the case is. It might be obviously a byproduct of the reason, but that's probably not what the reason is, right? So you got to think about things like that. I'd have to look into that and see what's going on. Let's check in here, see what's going on, because it's late for me.
The Senator from North Carolina.
Mr. President, thank you. We are in the middle of the worst border crisis in American history.
Border. Trump had border things that he killed, so this isn't going to go anywhere. One of the things is, this is going to keep going, guys. You're more than welcome to go pick this up. One of the things is, we're always streaming here on Wednesdays. We always do the stream, and sometimes on Fridays y'all get a bonus stream from me. The biggest thing that I have here is as we go through and we're closing everything down, is to remember that the Senate here this is the last hope that we're at right now. It's 1:02 a.m. Central Standard Time. I expect that nothing's going to get passed tonight, and that's really frustrating. I don't know how late they're going to go, but the government's going to partially shut down. It already is going to partially shut down. I think we do need to do something about that and get things moving forward, where we're able to pass some legislation. I'm not really sure why we keep on trying to throw stuff in last minute, but the more of this stuff you watch, the more you see. And this is always what happens whenever I've seen these, is we have these debates here at the end. We're throwing little tidbits in, and eventually people get tired out and start dropping out. I'm not sure who's going to win on this. I'm almost positive that the Republicans are going to probably fold. We already have a motion in the House to vacate the seat, so Republicans are looking a little bit weak right now. And most of America is blaming Republicans anyway for the Senate bill that was killed. So there's that as well. We do have a ad that's coming in here, but I am going to be heading out, guys. It has been a great night. Just to let you know, we are going to be editing this down, putting it onto our podcast series, which is going to be launching here in 2 weeks onto Spotify and anywhere else where you get your podcasts. So I just wanted to mention that to everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hopefully, I'll catch you guys next Wednesday. And remember to stay neat, guys. If you haven't already, drop that follow. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you guys next time.
This podcast was brought to you by The Political Gamer, produced by The Political Gamer, edited by The Political Gamer, and associated with The Political Gamer. You can find our podcast recordings wherever you find your podcasts, and remember to subscribe if you can, or drop us a follow us on Twitch, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter or X. We will be back next week for more news, laughs, and/or tears. Stay neat, and we wish you good mental health.